What's up everyone, it's ENDYMION, and Star Wars The Acolyte Episode 4 is finally here, so naturally let's dissect it and see what Disney has done following the most controversial episode in years. Does it get better? Can it even do that? Beyond this, we'll also talk about Access Media attacking the Critical Drinker Nerdrotic, and a former Lucasfilm employee airing out dirty laundry and letting the fans know just how bad it is behind the scenes over at Disney. Firstly, let's review the newest episode of The Acolyte. Overall, it's pretty much a setup episode with not much happening somehow. The episode was around 40 minutes long, and yet what actually happened here could have easily been summed up in a tight 10-minute episode instead. But of course, they stretch it out like crazy. Anyway, we see an actual white male Jedi Master training Daphne Keen's character, which was honestly surprising considering how this show has been towards white males so far. The Jedi is even a ginger too, which is doubly surprising considering how Hollywood treats ginger characters. If you know, you know. The entire episode is about May's team and Osha's team trying to get to Kalnaka first. If you don't remember, Kalnaka is the Wookiee Jedi that's been heavily promoted. And sadly, the character, like every other even remotely cool character, is utterly wasted here, but we'll get into that in a bit. Kalnaka is shown in his hut, and he has the white dotted symbols on his walls, the very same ones May has on her head, which she obtained once Mother Anastasia marks her as a witch in episode 3 if you remember. So Kalnaka has obviously been exploring and researching what the Witch's Coven was capable of in their free time. This isn't brought up again in the episode, and May arrives on the planet Kalnaka is chilling on to come to kill him, and May and Kamir, who's that scoundrel guy that's been helping her, they are now traveling together. Apparently, May made a deal with the Master, that's what they call the Smiling Helmet Sith apparently. And this deal, whatever it is, we don't know, involves May needing to kill the Jedi that were there the night when May and Osha's family were murdered. And May somehow burnt down an entire concrete citadel with a small fire caused by paper. I don't know, man. Regardless, we don't learn what this deal is, but we learn that neither May nor Kamir or anyone seems to know the identity of this master. Remember that Smilo Ren, as Alan Ng of Film Thread calls the character, trained May to fight Jedi. Yet she never knew this person apparently. They even refer to this character as a man, which I think is a misdirect since I still think it's Coral, the woman who was the surrogate mother for May and Osha, but let's keep going. There's also a moment where Osha is on the ship with the rest of the Jedi on their way to Kalnaka's planet, and Osha asks for the pronouns of Basil, a small weird alien creature that tracks people for the Jedi. It felt shoehorned in and pretty stupid all things considered, but it's brushed off pretty easily and then the plot just keeps going. Also, we learn from May later on in this episode that Smilo Ren apparently collects people, but we also don't know what that means. We're not sure if Smilo Ren collects just anyone or if it's strictly Force users. However, if the deal involves May killing the Jedi for Smilo Ren, I would assume Smilo is likely collecting the dead bodies of these Jedi. Maybe they siphon the Force out of them or something to become stronger. But again, the mere existence of this Sith Master is weird considering the High Republic was a time of peace and Jedi dominance. May also tells Kamir that the Master's final lesson for May for her training is the final lesson is the one you teach yourself. I assume this means the Master wants May to come to her own conclusions once all the Jedi that are required are killed. But May makes a point to say that due to this deal she made with the Master, if she does not fulfill said deal, the Master will hunt her down and kill her personally. May also seems to be losing her edge and nerve on her way to Kalnaka, which is unusual for her considering how stalwart she's been otherwise. The Jedi and Osha start trekking into the woods where Kalnaka is, and they fight a big beetle which Master Soul cuts in half with his lightsaber. And I'm not kidding you, besides this single swipe of a lightsaber, there is not a single action scene in this entire episode. It's literally just people walking, talking, and pretty much filling up and wasting time. If you remove the Osha side of the story from this episode, not much would be lost besides the ending. May is also the only somewhat interesting angle the Acolyte has going for them, but sadly they waste too much time on the other twin who's not even a Jedi anymore, and they're really boring, dude. But what's very bizarre is randomly, once May gets close to where Kalnaka, the Wookiee Jedi, is living, she just suddenly baits Kamir into a trap which strings him up, and then she kinda just leaves him there. saying that she suddenly, out of nowhere, has decided that Osha, her sister, is now her calling and she's against the Master. Khmer tells May that she would be stupid to run from the Master because they would track her down and kill her, but May believes it's suddenly better to be a prisoner of the Jedi than take her chances outside in the galaxy where the Master could get to her. This tonal shift, it feels rushed, and the only implication or reasoning I could connect is that May was slowly losing her trust, or devotion I guess, to the Master on her way to Kelnaka. And likely, I guess, because I don't know yet, but it's probably because the Master can feel May losing faith in the mission. So May probably assumed if she were to kill Kanaka, the Master would sense her lack of motivation or devotion to the cause, and the Master would simply strike her down anyways, making her vendetta pointless ultimately. But to say this is a bizarre tonal shift would be an understatement, fellas. It just sort of happens literally out of nowhere. Master Soul, played by the Squid Game guy, also tells Osha right before they reach Kelnaka that he wants to save May. And when they do, Soul will tell Osha and May everything he knows about the Master. Which is very weird, but means Soul likely knows who the Master is, but this also feels like a plot hole. Because being a Jedi Master, why would Soul keep the identity of arguably the Jedi's deadliest adversary at this moment in time from the rest of the Council? Speaking of the Council, I forgot to mention, but earlier in the episode, Soul is at a meeting with all of the supposed Jedi Masters of this Council in Coruscant. And they're all diverse women and men of color with not a single white man in sight. I took a photo of this scene so you can look at it, but yeah, none of the Jedi are white men. It was honestly funny to witness. At this point, I'm not surprised really, but it just evidently comes across as agenda pushing in the blatant sense. But anyway, circling back to the ending of the episode, Soul, Osha, and the Jedi arrive at Kelnaka's residence. May arrives a little bit earlier than they do as well. May then enters Kelnaka's residence to face him to find the Wookiee slumped in his chair with a giant lightsaber slash across his chest. Remember when I said the Wookiee Jedi is wasted? Yeah, I meant it, because Kelnaka quite literally doesn't do anything at all. They literally just exist like Torben to be killed off for plot reasons, which is unfortunate because, I mean, it's a Wookiee Jedi. That could have been cool to see in action. But instead, Kelnaka is now dead, to which May in utter fear mentions that the Master, or Smilo Ren, must have done this to Kelnaka. Which pretty much confirms what I was thinking before, which is that the Master knew May was becoming disillusioned with the revenge plan and all of that, and likely went ahead of her to do it themselves. Which means May either way would end up dead whether she fought Kelnaka and survived, or tried to flee and give herself to the Jedi. Which was her plan so that she could get arrested and protected by the Jedi, but now neither of her eventual realities will come to fruition, it seems. Osha and the Jedi arrive, and Osha suddenly turns around to see Smilo Ren walking towards her somehow, and the Jedi, including Master Soul, are just unable to sense Smilo Ren's presence, and Osha looks terrified as Smilo gets close to her and looks her in the eyes, or I think anyway, I don't know, they're wearing a helmet. Then that scene from the trailer happens, you know, the one where all those Jedis light up their lightsabers all at once, and then Soul and the rest of them, they kind of just rush towards Osha to save her from the Master. To which the Master raises their hand without saying a word and force pushes literally everybody like they're nothing. Even Master Soul, who again is a Jedi Master, is thrown away like a used napkin in the wind by the Master. And then the debris kind of just muddles up the camera, and that's how episode 4 ends. For once, Leslie Headland actually ends an episode of The Acolyte on a bona fide cliffhanger, unlike the rest of the episodes. Generally speaking, in terms of quality, setting up things and whatnot, episode 4 is easily the best episode of the 4 available right now, but it's not great either. Like I said, there is no action sequences really, just a lot of talking, and honestly, most of it still looks really cheap, like the sets, they just don't feel like Star Wars to me. The entire episode, as I said, is just one big setup to get all the players together in one place conveniently in order to have the Master show up. This begs the question now as to who the Master is, and now I have two suspects of my own. Firstly is Mother Coral, but we never actually see this character being trained or wielding a lightsaber. And while the helmet could suppress her natural horns, it seems very unlikely, and more likely the helmet would instead be formed to her horns instead. But maybe it's done that way to obviously conceal her identity. However, now I have a more compelling suspect because it just makes too much sense to me. Which is Master Vernestra, who's played by Leslie Headland's wife, the skinny, bald, green alien woman in case you forgot. Anyway, it would make sense that one of the Jedi's own are scheming against them and systematically using someone to cut down Jedi that could stand in Vernestra's way of becoming the prime Grand Jedi Master of the Coruscant Council. But also because obviously the Master uses a lightsaber, which Vern would absolutely be trained in, and their use of the Force, especially with that push, made me believe that only a Jedi Master could have created such a Force push that it would also have thrown Sol like a rag doll. Plus, Vern personally advocates for Sol and Osha to go to the planet Kalnaka is on, which is called Kofir, by the way. And Vern also silences the other Jedi during that council scene earlier on, and it would also make sense since obviously Vern would know where Kalnaka is, and would know when and where Sol and the other Jedi would be and arrive at because she obviously has access to all of this information. It would make sense for Vern wanting to bring them all together so that she could kill them and likely absorb their power or whatever the Master's plans are. It makes me believe that Vern is supposed to be a Palpatine-like figure, someone who seems like an ally but is actually the worst person ever. We know also that Sith always come in two, and May, as far as I can tell, is not actually a Sith. She is trained by the Master, who is apparently a Sith, but we don't see May actually looking like a Sith or anything like that. Sith are usually gross or bald, and Vern is both, so that kind of makes me also lead more into her being the Master. Which also means the Master likely has another Master that's pulling all of the strings. The most likely candidate here is probably Darth Plagueis, who is alive at this time. And again, based on rumors, apparently Plagueis might be the main villain of Rey's new Star Wars movie, allegedly of course. So I would wager Vern is working for Plagueis or someone similar with a different name to round up dead Jedi, to siphon them of their midichlorians or whatever, in order to make a perfect Force user, or the Acolyte in the end, I guess you could say. That's my theory anyways, but really besides that, there isn't much else to say, and who knows, I could be completely wrong about all of this. But I'm obviously watching this so that you don't have to, but if you have any theories as to what's happening, let me know in the comments, of course. Overall, I think most characters, they still feel wasted and underutilized, and the show is wasting precious time to build up to obvious cliffhangers. There wasn't enough happening here, and without the Mace stuff, this episode would literally be devoid of anything tangible to talk about. The Acolyte is still struggling to keep my attention, and the main characters are some of the most dull main characters we've had in Star Wars, and that's saying something. If you're curious to watch this, my advice is don't do it. This episode doesn't do anything to move the needle in any real positive way. This is still bottom of the barrel and somehow looks worse than previous shows despite its budget. The show desperately needs more interesting characters, and the main plot, while still not fully explained, it could be interesting. But I don't see Headland landing the jump if I'm being honest. But that's what I thought of episode 4. I'll keep watching it so you don't have to. Also, before we move on, I also want to point out quickly that it turns out the Acolyte writers don't actually know Star Wars lore whatsoever. Because in the episode, Ki-Adi-Mundi shows up randomly. He's even listed in the credits as well. Fans online are making fun of Leslie Headland and Disney because Ki deliberately states in the prequel films that the Sith have not been around for 1,000 years. Yet the Acolyte takes place prior to the prequel films. And yet he makes no mention of this story happening during the prequels, which means Disney is just deliberately changing lore yet again to fit their new story ideas with no regard for the stuff George Lucas has made in the past. Fans have pointed out that Ki-Adi wasn't born for at least 40 years prior to the Acolyte, yet here he is anyways. Just listen to this mini rant from Star Wars Theory about this, he puts it perfectly.
I can't wait to see what people are gonna... What are people gonna say to defend this? Oh, I don't know, you guys are just toxic, you just hate you're sexist. Bro, why is Ki-Adi-Mundi here? He's not supposed to be here. He would have right away, man. He would have, the same guy. Man, it's fuck. The same guy that literally in episode 1 is like, oh, the Sith haven't shown up for 1,000 years. Is the same guy corroborating and keeping the shit hidden? No. It's bull.
Now let's move on to this other story where of all places, Looper is attacking other YouTube channels for their opinions. In case you haven't seen it, which I don't blame you since Looper has removed the clip from the internet, they pretty much denounce channels like Critical Drinker Nerdrotic and claim it's their fault the discourse surrounding Acolyte is so bad. Thankfully, we do have the clip still which Nerdrotic posted, so here, watch.
Some audience members have issues with the show's diversity and LGBTQ+ themes, and those should be dismissed. However, viewers should genuinely examine the legitimate criticisms the Acolyte has received. Cultural critics like the Critical Drinker Nerdrotic have dubbed the show lore-breaking for its recent revelations, but their commentary isn't productive. Rather, it encourages bigotry and hatred over a show that's just getting started. As always, rage baits and review bombings distract from actual criticism. In particular, Episode 3 has proven to be controversial, and perhaps rightfully so.
And as you can see, they straight up say any criticism towards the Acolyte should be dismissed entirely simply because it doesn't praise the show, which is BS, of course. Also, Looper saying fans hate the show because of its diversity and LGBTQIA+ themes is not entirely true. The reason why people don't like the show is because it fundamentally ruins and retroactively retcons previous lore to make way for new, worse ideas. Of course, I'm not denying that there is a portion of the fanbase that is likely anti-LGBT. They do exist, I'm not denying that, but I think the majority of the reasoning here is that they made Anakin's existence now far less important, among other things. Not to mention the whole witches making life out of the Force while conveniently neither falling to either side of the Force. And of course, replacing the Force with a new concept called the Thread. It just all feels like something that was made by committee in every regard, but I don't think attacking or saying Drinker or Gary's opinions should be dismissed is professional either. Looper, of course, is your typical access media YouTube channel. They pump out loads of slop every single day on multiple channels. For them, it's never been about quality over quantity, so I can see why they don't like Nerdrotic or Drinker because, well, they're the opposite of that. The reason why YouTubers in general are being highly regarded when it comes to these communities and opinions is because unlike Looper, or IGN, or stuff like Watch Mojo, these solo YouTubers, they don't answer to anyone but their fan bases. And let's be real here, Drinker could release one video about Acolyte and it'll get more views than multiple Looper videos combined, and Drinker's content is just him and maybe an editor or two at best. Whereas Looper is a whole team working day in and day out, pumping out regurgitated content hoping something strikes gold. Looper, by the way, has over 5 million subscribers. They are essentially 5 times the size of Nerdrotic's channel right now. Yet when you look at their videos, the views, they just don't make any sense. I took this screenshot yesterday as of the making of this video, and look, their videos are getting views barely breaking 20,000 at best. This just tells me that Looper is a channel full of subscribers who have either completely moved on or the majority of their subs are dead accounts or even bots, and that wouldn't surprise me at all. The point here is Looper needs to release multiple videos constantly in order to gain any traction, but that's what happens when you're releasing content constantly that doesn't say anything or challenges the viewer's perceptions or beliefs. There's nothing dynamic here at all, and it's no surprise that they would go after names like Drinker and such because they actually have something to say. And they're not bound by the red tape so many access media accounts and platforms are tied to. Why would I watch Looper or even IGN when it comes to a review of a movie? I would rather watch someone like Drinker or Jeremy Johns. Because I know those guys don't answer to a giant monolith. The truth is that what viewers value the most these days especially isn't quantity of content. I'm a one-man show over here. Well, besides my 2 dogs who are my executive producer and lead writer, but besides my dogs, I edit, write, and obviously do the voiceovers and all of that. My main goal here is to give you what's happening in an unbiased manner because I am not you and I don't control you in any way. I just want you to know what the hell is happening without all the mumbo jumbo surrounding these things so you can make an informed decision and have your own opinions. I think there's value in that, and clearly Looper doesn't think that. Saying that we should completely disregard people's opinions about something simply because the thing being discussed isn't universally liked is beyond stupid to me. So we shouldn't be critical and give feedback on anything unless it's positive. That just makes the content worse ultimately in the end. Looper is saying this against Drinker and Gary not only because they disagree with them, but also because, let's just say it how it is, fellas, they're jealous. You don't get to that peak without fostering a strong community, and Looper wishes that they had those numbers. It's sad too, because you could combine Drinker and Nerdrotic's channels in subs, and Looper still has more, yet they get barely even 1% of their entire sub base watching their content. That's really bad, dude. When your 5 million subscriber channel can't even break 6,000 views on a new video, it's time to recalibrate and genuinely look at what you're doing wrong. Looper to me is like the YouTube equivalent to biased news networks. They're so caught up in the rhythm, they have no breathing room to change anything. Looper would be better off making 1 to 3 videos a week with actual passion that isn't slop, and then they could maybe mobilize that massive subscriber count that they have. but that would require them to actually be honest and not pander like morons, which is the opposite of what Drinker Nerdrotic, Yellow Flash, and even me do. Looper proves that the event horizon of corporate shilling content is a race to the bottom of the barrel where your channel just goes to die. I can't imagine being a yes man for companies like Disney, even if it meant getting exclusive access to things. You could send me a replica lightsaber with a Jabba the Hutt fleshlight. I ain't gonna shill for Disney ever. Even a former employee said working there was embarrassing and anyone who questioned the status quo was attacked ruthlessly. From that Park Place, this one is titled, "Former Lucasfilm animation employee says he's embarrassed and ashamed to have worked at Lucasfilm and on Star Wars after the Acolyte." So the individual in question runs a YouTube channel called Knee Pain, and they apparently used to work at Lucasfilm for years until they eventually left the industry altogether. They had a video where they detailed all of this publicly, but the video has since gone private. Which in my opinion validates its concerns and criticisms because it's very likely someone at Disney saw the video and then personally contacted this individual, which is glorious. They had a lot to say, but since the video is gone now, I will have to read what they said, and I quote, "I was there when that happened and watched 90% of my coworkers get laid off. I was lucky enough to survive that layoff. I use the word lucky loosely. But I was there during the transition. I'll admit early on there was some hope. There was hope because they sat down, Kathleen Kennedy, in a presentation of the company and they showed us something we had never seen before under George, and that was a 10-year plan. I actually felt really good about that. They said there's going to be 3 more movies, we're all really excited. I left some years after that. I've been gone for about 7 years now, and I talked about this in another video when the third set of trilogies came out, The Force Awakens and the whole thing with Rey. I tried to block out a lot of it. Actually, I don't remember the names of those episodes that came out under Kathleen Kennedy, but I remember going to the crew screenings and coming out not really feeling it. And then having the audacity and the nerve at work to say, yeah, I didn't really like it, and then starting to find out who the real fanboys are. And I'll tell you what, some of the biggest fanboys you'll find and the most toxic, they work there. Because you weren't allowed to not like it. If you had an opinion, best keep it to yourself. People would make you very, very uncomfortable. I really was not happy with the culture, the life there. It had changed a lot. I remember a personal experience being in the studio and being like, I don't know if I really like the character Rey. And just like my coworkers just losing their minds at me, really getting pissed off at me because I didn't like it. Dave Filoni has had the power for a long time. He's even had power back to the Clone War days to carefully push back on certain decisions. When it came to Clone Wars, because definitely early on George drove it all, but there was definitely a point, and I can't really tell you what season it was, where Filoni, and rightfully so, if you're the supervising director, you need to stand up for the project at some point. He did the right thing in standing up to George. I also knew and saw The Acolyte before. You see little tidbits like this. I don't need to see the whole thing, honestly, to know that there's really bad writing involved. This is just so cringy. Outside the blasted song, that was awful. Honestly, between clips like that and this overwhelmingly negative response by the fans, why on earth would I want to subscribe to Disney Plus? To actually watch this so I could have an informed opinion. My opinion's informed enough. It used to be kind of nice to have that part of my life on the resume. It made for a good icebreaker, especially when I got out of the industry. Now, it's kind of embarrassing actually. I can't believe I'm actually kind of ashamed a little bit. Now with that said, I think I'd be more ashamed if I'd worked at Lucasfilm over the past 6 to 8 years. That's definitely worth being ashamed of. I left before things got really bad, but I'm still kind of ashamed. But I do feel bad for the fans, end quote. And like I said, this video is now gone, so it's very clear what Knee Pain said here was likely what was actually going on at Disney Lucasfilm. But they have nothing to lose because, like they said, they moved on from that industry and they just left it all behind, and good for them. And really, who could blame them for doing that? Before, having Lucasfilm on your resume meant you had a hand in cult classics from movies, shows to games, but now? It means you could be directly responsible for the spewing of garbage coming out every other month on Disney+. And people like Knee Pain, like Drinker or Nerdrotic, these are people who are being slandered and attacked because they're telling the truth. That's really all it is. Claiming we're all sexist bigots simply because we don't subscribe to the norm is proof enough in my eyes. Being a geek used to be considered lame. I would know. I was teased growing up for liking this stuff, but I didn't care because it meant a lot to me, as it still does. But now that it's cool and corporations have absorbed everything we loved and ruined it by transforming it to something we don't recognize anymore, and the fact that these companies and their watchdogs are trying to turn this around and say it's somehow our fault and we should apologize or have our opinions silenced because we don't subscribe to the corporate laziness and blatant hypocrisy is crazy to me. It's never been more clear than ever before that these companies hate us and the people who shill for them are not genuine in any way. I don't care what Looper thinks about anything, and clearly their own fanbase doesn't either, based on those abysmal numbers. What we're simply seeing is that they want people like Drinker or Nerdrotic gone because they are actually challenging the status quo. And challenging something that was put there deliberately to push an agenda is a big no-no when it comes to corporations. The Acolyte's backlash is not because of just diversity or gayness, it's because the show is garbage and completely ruins the mythos of a franchise that people loved. And it also no longer resembles what we enjoyed about Star Wars either. Any other gotcha they try is simply designed to further their agenda. I want Star Wars to be great, but within the confines of where it is right now, that is very unlikely to happen anytime soon, if ever. Anyway, I think this video is plenty long as it is already, so I thank you for watching, subscribe, share, like the video, and thanks to my patrons as well. Drinker and Nerdrotic are not at fault here, and it's refreshing to see ex-Lucasfilm employees dunk on their employer like this. And as for the show itself, the Acolyte desperately needs something interesting to happen, or I will fall into a coma come next episode. Have a wonderful day, I'll keep you all updated on everything, and I'll see you in the next one.